Accomando. I'm Beth Accomando, supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another welcome to another Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie Cinema Junkie Cinemacast Cinema Junkie Cinema Junkie podcast Cinema podcast Cinema podcast Cinema Beth Accomando. Edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie.
Ooh, sorry. Okay, so we are now going live with the Cinema Junkie relaunch party. This is because Cinema Junkie went through a little bit of revamping over the quarantine break. And now the first podcast of the relaunch is available at kpbs.org/cinemajunkie. And I'm here with Eric Leonardis, who's going to be our DJ for the evening. And he's going to be playing some tunes for us. And one of the reasons I asked you to do this is because you remixed some of my old interviews with your music. So how did that all come about?
Yeah, I was basically playing a set and looking for some quotes to mix in with the music, and I remembered that you have such a wealth of great stuff in your interviews with really important filmmakers that have had a huge influence on me, so I incorporated it and figured you'd be cool with it, and you were. So I'm happy to be here today to do some mixes. One of the ones that I'm really excited about that's going to come up next is a remix of an interview you did with David Cronenberg. When I was young, like 13 or 14, I saw the movie Videodrome, and that totally cracked open my reality, and definitely, I don't know, it brought me to a new plane of consciousness. I think I think that horror movies are a way of learning about how harsh the world can really be, and learning about how horrifying the body can truly be. And as a neuroscientist, these are the types of weird things that I like to explore. But thanks.
Well, cool. We are going to be exploring a lot of cool things tonight because the theme of tonight's Twitch party is Share Your Addiction. So we're going to be talking to a number of people here in studio, which by that I mean in my house because we're all working from home. And so we're going to be talking to some people about their addiction to film. And in case I forgot, I'm Beth Accomando, host of KPBS Cinema Junkie. You know, you forget these things sometimes. But to start off the night and to start off with their addiction to film, we're going to talk to Jen and Sylvia Soska, the Twisted Twins who directed American Mary. And I spoke to them while they were in Canada just after their heat wave. So here are the Soskas. So tell me, what early memories do you have about either going to the movies or watching movies?
Well, I think every little girl, when they first think about who they want to be cool like their mom. So this is my mom's fault, our mom's fault. She loved horror movies. And then there was the juxtaposition that what she was doing, she said we weren't allowed to partake of because we were too young. My dad said sometimes because we were nice girls and we shouldn't. And it just made it so much more exciting and tantalizing. I remember they had the TV set up and they would close the bedroom door, but they would leave it open a crack. So me and Jen were just watching these movies being like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then we would always go to our local video store, and this is back when they had VHS boxes, and my mom would go pick out what movie we were watching, and we would just go to the horror movie section and we'd grab the boxes and be like, oh my gosh, like it was treasure. Like we couldn't believe we were, I guess we were too young to even be looking at the boxes, but we would be looking and be like, wow, this guy's face is missing and this guy's got bloody teeth, so maybe this guy eats faces and that's what the movie's about. We get so excited. Our mom would be like, yeah, you can't watch that right now.
She tricked us into it though. My biggest childhood memory is Stephen King novels, and that was like, I was a good Catholic girl. I read the Bible and I read my Stephen King novels, which were as long as Bibles.
Oh my God,
just as nasty and controversial. And I remember sitting there with my thesaurus because I needed to figure out what he was talking about in my dictionary, and I was under 10 at a high school reading level. And my mom said if I was able to read the book, we were able to watch the movie.
Yeah.
So we basically divided up all of Stephen King's novels. She read half, I read the other half, so we could watch them all together. And for whatever reason, for me, it's like girl time. It's so nostalgic.
Yeah.
I don't even think that it was like horror. It's kind of like Wednesday Addams with Morticia. I was just hanging out with my cool mom.
Yeah, I remember watching so many movies with her, and the thing was just she always wanted to talk about it, and it made the movies like even more fun because you'd watch them and be like, girls, what do you think you just saw? I remember the once in a horror movie section, they put in Edward Scissorhands, and my mom knew something was wrong with me because I wasn't in the horror section. I was like hiding, and she was like, Sylvia, why are you not in the horror section? I was like, they put a scary man in there and he's got like claws for hands. And she went over and she knew what Edward Scissorhands was. And she's like, we're going to watch this tonight. And I was like, Mom, we can't. I was like, oh my God, I won. I'm getting a horror movie. And we watched it together. And I remember afterwards, she's like, do you know what the movie was about? And I was like, yeah, they were mean to the monster. And he was really a nice guy. And she's like, not everybody who looks like a monster is, and not everybody who seems like a nice guy isn't a monster, just like the boyfriend. And I remember watching that as a kid. And then all of a sudden it changed the bad guys in horror movies for me. So I was like, Pinhead's cool. He kind of tells you what he's all about. And if you get messed up, he already set the rules.
My favorite memory watching movies with my mom was Alien, because it got to that infamous scene at the end. And I remember I was scared. I wanted to turn it off because I thought if you turn it off, it had a happy ending. And my mom said, no. Ripley always wins. My mom doesn't even remember saying this to me, but in my mind, Ripley and Sigourney Weaver were one and the same, and she could never die. And it's true, she's such a badass. And that was like such a huge change for me too, because I didn't realize I was also watching the evolution of the final girl, where she was no longer this weak character, and now she was just badass, and she took care of her cat.
What I love about this is that, like with my dad, is your mom talked to you about films. Like it wasn't just using this as a babysitter. It was something that, you talked about and you put into a context, and like it made you think about things. It wasn't just, oh yeah, I'm going to watch this just to distract me for 2 hours. And I think that's really important in like creating this real love for movies, not just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to watch this to be entertained for a couple hours.
Absolutely. And it's good at fighting the stigma that I think a lot of horror fans get, because people are like, oh my God, you watch those movies? And it's like, well, clearly you don't watch those movies because they're elevated horror. They're so intellectual. They're talking about political stuff that if you put in a drama, people will be like, oh, boring. But if it's a homicidal family, count me in. I'm watching. Like, it's so interesting to see how people like. One of the reasons I even got into wanting to direct horror movie is I saw Mary Herron on the news, and she was trying to film a movie in Toronto, American Psycho. And the news was saying, how can you promote violence against women? What is wrong? And I was like, what is this? And she was so eloquent in talking about the satire and everything. And I was like, who is this woman? And what is this movie? And then I ended up following it, and I was like, this is amazing. And I always admired her being so eloquent, because she could have just been like, oh, shut the fuck up, you don't know what you're talking about. But she never went low, she always went high. And I was like, oh, that's why Mary makes such cool movies like that. She never stoops to that level. She's always kind of like that elevated horror.
I know I make horror movies because I watched horror movies with my mom, for sure. I know my first horror movie now was Altered States, but I repressed like the whole movie.
Same.
Because I remember watching it later and being like, wait a minute, I saw this. The first one I did remember all the way through was Poltergeist. I repressed the scene where the face came off. And I remember I was so scared because that was like my first real horror movie that I didn't have to sneak. And let's be honest, that's like the worst one to start your children on, especially your little girl with what happens to Carrie Ann. I couldn't even walk by a TV because I thought it would get me.
Or a clown. It's like closets. What else is in the house just to scare your children? Just everyday items.
Just things that were normal that were now terrifying. And I remember I was so scared at bedtime. And then my mom set me on this path and she said, you know, there's actors, there's directors, there's writers, there's a monster makers. It's their job to scare you. And I said, whoa, back up. It's their job to scare you? That's amazing. And then I just became kind of a gore head because I would watch like the house movies and the most extreme. Yeah, that's why probably even if I make a Disney movie, it'll be like one weird little Soska moment.
Like a head crush or something. And then, well, James Gunn still gets his stuff in there and he's working for Disney. I feel like after Suicide Squad, which is like hard R, maybe the tides will turn like in the 90s and we'll see some hard R movies slipping in there. I mean, like, poor Suicide Squad not being rated R, like poor David Ayer. That was good. I have so many friends who worked on that original one. They're like, it could have been such a good movie. It was just right there.
Oh man, the new Suicide Squad though, doesn't it feel like a really high budget trauma movie?
Yes. I hope Lloyd's in it.
It feels like the biggest budget trauma movie, and I'm like, yes, the nerds have won.
Well, the coolest people have come out of trauma, and think about that. Like, it's almost like European or Asian cinema where it's absurdist and you see stuff that you would never normally see. If it's like a fever dream watching a trauma movie, and then afterwards you're like, wow. And then you go on and you see like Matt Stone and Trey Parker go on and like become these geniuses, and you're like, oh yeah, Cannibal the Musical. I remember that.
I still have a fond memory of the trauma panel at Comic-Con where Lloyd was talking and wanted to show some trailers, and he had James Gunn was there and a couple of other people, but the video projector wasn't working. So all these directors were on their hands and knees under the table, like checking connectors. And I think it was James Gunn who popped out from under the like curtain, you know, going like, this, you can tell it's a trauma production. And
I like that they went back into trauma mode right away. They're like, oh shit, this isn't playing. Okay, what did we do? What did we do when this happened?
I'm surprised they didn't just like act out what it was supposed to be. They're like, okay, just visualize.
Yeah, but those skills, you never lose them. Like, even if you're on like a $300 million movie, something stupid is going to happen and you're going to need a free creative solution.
Mm-hmm. MacGyver.
You're
it
going to have to
teaches you how to
MacGyver.
MacGyver shit together. Or MacGruber if you prefer.
All right.
We did not coordinate our wardrobe, but we
This does happen.
our American Mary at the Digital Gym Cinema shirts. All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth.
Comfortable cinema. We're on that score, you know. I find that quite odd. I'm not looking to make comfortable cinema. That's quite odd. Looking to make comfortable cinema. Some comfort on that score, you know. I find that quite odd. I'm not looking to make comfortable cinema. Comfortable cinema. Some comfort on that, you know. I find that quite odd. I'm not looking to make comfortable cinema, some comfort on that, you know. I find that quite odd. I'm not looking to make comfortable cinema, some comfort on that score, you know. I find that quite odd. I'm not looking to make comfortable cinema, some comfort on that score, you know. I find that.
Okay, that was Eric Leonardis. That's our DJ. And he was mixing in some of my interview of David Cronenberg, which is really appropriate because the Soska sisters just remade Rabid. And tonight we have here in studio, again, this is in my house. This is working from home, guys. I have Miguel Rodriguez of Horrible Imaginings Film Festival.
Hello.
And Yazdi Pathalova of Movie Wallas.
Hello, everyone.
So thank you all for joining us. We're having a great time here listening to tunes and talking about movies. Again, the theme is Share Your Addiction. So Miguel, you actually showed the Soskas' first movie, Dead Hooker in a Trunk, at your Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. And you have a new festival coming up. So do you think there are going to be any talents like the Soskas coming up?
Yeah, I definitely do. We are announcing a first wave soon, so I can't really talk about anything specific yet, but there are some very interesting things coming up. It's great because that was our first festival and it was their first feature, and we've kind of grown up together, and it's really cool to see how far they've come and know how far we've come, and that's been really just exciting. But honestly, like, one of the big things we're trying to do for this year is to find new young filmmakers. So we have initiatives to fund films for student filmmakers this year that I'm very excited about. And I could talk about that later if you want.
And you have a little tease for us?
Oh, do I have a tease?
Oh, don't be like those guests on late night TV. Oh, is there a clip? I don't know. Did you bring one?
Please tell me we're going to show a clip from Mac and Me now. Yeah, actually, this will be the first ever look at a few of our first selections for the 2021 season. So this is the first time anyone will see any clips from any of these movies.
We're getting a preview, and we have our tech person in-house is Mel Shaw, and she's going to take us into the clip. All right, Mel, take it away. Okay, if we're all like leaning over looking at something, it's because we get to see the monitor over here, and we can sometimes read your comments from here, and we'll try to drop in now and again and answer them. But that festival looks great. I've been going to your festival since day one. Yeah. So, in fact, that's how I met you, was because you were looking for help for starting a festival. And it's your fault I do a podcast, because you said, why don't you do a podcast? It's easy. Ha.
You're welcome.
Ha. Ha. Easy.
And yet I no longer do a podcast. So yeah, there you go.
But let me ask you real quick, what are kind of your early memories of movies? And can you pinpoint like something as to why you got hooked on film?
Well, I grew up with them. I was taken to the movies when I was an infant, when I was a toddler, and there were no real lines drawn into what we could see. And my grandmother spoke Spanish and didn't speak English very well, and I was never taught Spanish. So the way that I related to my grandmother on my mom's side was to watch movies together, and she liked monster movies. So that is really the kind of genesis of Baby Miguel. Yeah, it's always been there. It's how, I mean, in that way, in a very real way, it's how I related to people, is through finding these emotional cues in films and relating on that level.
And Yazdi, you actually grew up in India where the movie industry is huge. So what are some of your earliest memories of film, and can you point to a moment that you feel like you really got hooked on films?
Yeah, like Miguel, I was taken to the movies. My family, we were a big family, all lived in the same apartment, and we would go to see the movies every Saturday. And I remember like being 3 or 4 and just like, can we do something else? Why do we have to do this every Saturday? But it really helped me, because I think now I look back as those being the happiest days, from my childhood. And I think what really hooked me is this belief in our family that, movies go with celebration. So anytime it's anybody's birthday, we have a big meal, and then somebody goes in India, you have to book your tickets, way back when you get your seats, and your birthday's associated with going and watching a new movie. So for me, it automatically became something of joy.
Well, and that's part of what I think is great about being addicted to films. It's really this communal experience is really important. And one of the people I talked to is Moises Esparza. Now, he works with Media Arts Center and San Diego Latino Film Festival, and he programs films at the Digital Gym Cinema. And so he has some memories of coming to the U.S. from Mexico and watching films. Okay, this is part of the remote Cinema Junkie live Twitch party. And I am here at the brand new Digital Gym facility, which is downtown at Market and Park. And I am here with Moises Esparza, who is not only the person who programs the films at Digital Gym, but you are also one of the people who gives us all the great programming during the San Diego Latino Film Festival. So the theme of this is all share your addiction. So Moises, I wanted to talk to you because I know you love film, and I love your programming choices because you seem to care so deeply about movies. So I was just curious, do you have, what are your early memories of going to the movies? What were the experiences you had, and what made you fall in love with film?
Yeah, so my earliest memory of going to the movies is very specific because it aligns a bit with my first coming to the United States from Mexico. So the first movie I saw in theaters in the United States was Toy Story. The movie is great, but I remember the experience so distinctly because even as a child, I felt I was going through a tumultuous time with this big transition from living in Mexico to moving to the United States. And I just remember so vividly that instance of just maybe forgetting about all of that because of Toy Story. And I felt just so connected to what was going on screen and so disassociated from real life in a way, which is maybe the great function of cinema, is that you go into maybe a black box, you see what's on screen, the light kind of allows this transference of your experience into the lives of, or whatever stories being portrayed on screen. So I was really able to disassociate from maybe kind of an intense moment in my life as a child and maybe just enjoy what the movie was. So it's very specific, but that's definitely what I remember as my earliest movie-going experience.
And at what point in your life did you kind of feel like you were going to actually have a career that involved movies?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When I was growing up, I wanted to be an actor, and I went to some workshops at the La Jolla Playhouse as a kid. And when I went to college and I started my film studies major, it was the first time really when I became exposed to film theory and film history on a very extensive scale. My professors chose, I guess challenging is the appropriate word, but just modalities and sensibilities that I'd never seen on screen during my time in school. And just them introducing me to something new made me really excited. So after I graduated from college, I was looking to do something similar at a cinema, the sharing of a different type of cinema to a community. And not only the actual viewing experience, but the dialogue that comes from watching movies. Because when I was growing up, I would watch movies with my family and we would be like, did you like it? Did you not like it? And then studying film, it all went beyond the did you like it, did you not like it? It all became part of a larger context that was focused on history or the psychology of watching films or studies on particular directors, and my understanding of film became so much more developed. So just my professor sharing these movies with me made me want to do something similar. And thankfully for me, I found that outlet through the Media Arts Center San Diego and the Digital Gym Cinema.
So we are sitting in what will be the seats of the new Digital Gym Cinema. So what is the importance of a small, essentially it's like a community theater, an art house, but what's the importance of a theater like that that's programming stuff that's not of the mainstream?
Yeah, the importance of the microcinema experience is really rooted in this idea of community outreach or connecting to your community and finding cinematic arts that appeal to specific communities here in San Diego. So that I think is what's really important about our space, is that we don't deal with commercial products very often. We're not so revenue focused, even though maybe we should be, but it's about celebrating the movies and how they connect to communities here in San Diego. We're at that intersection, and that's what drives my programming, is what can I show on screen that's going to not only allow that connection to be created between the audience and what's on screen, but to also push them to appreciate what we're screening on an artistic level too. So that's, I think, why we're so important and why we have such a maybe distinct space here in San Diego, because, you know, I don't think there's another art house like ours, at least locally. And there's so many individuals such as yourselves and the other film festival programmers in San Diego who screen films at their festivals, and I just feel really honored to kind of have a space alongside them to be able to program films as well.
Well, one of the things I really love about your programming, both at the Digital Gym and at the Latino Film Festival, is you're not afraid to push people out of their comfort zone. And talk a little bit about that kind of programming choice and why you enjoy kind of picking those films that maybe are a little more provocative and challenging.
It's less of a push for me, and it's more about just being able to exist in an unsettling space, perhaps with yourself. I don't ever want to show film to someone that they are immediately turned off by. That I don't think is productive. But when you see a film that you maybe can't conceptualize or contextualize within all the other films that you have seen, that's when I think that real growth happens as a spectator. So I don't show shocking films for the sake of shocking, but I do want these films to be considered within this unsettled kind of space where you're seeing maybe a deviation of specific genre norms, and your brain might be like, what is this? I don't really understand what's happening. But you sit through the film and you exist in this kind of undefined, unsettled space, and through that you become more appreciative of what's being done. And I think through that appreciation, we're able to uphold and the intention of these filmmakers who are just trying to create their own spin on an already kind of established art form. But yeah, I think existing in an unsettled space, I think is a good thing. And plus, I think I mentioned earlier, watching the film communally and watching the film in a dark cinema space where your senses are heightened, and you can allow for maybe this transference of your own state of mind or your own experiences on screen. That projection, I think, is really important to experiences that may not be your own. And I think that's when maybe we become more developed as a film-going audience. And so I hope people who watch films at the Digital Gym Cinema have similar experiences, and they're encouraged to seek out works that they may not consider before.
Now, the theme of my podcast relaunch is Share Your Addiction. So is there something that you would like to share that you're either particularly in love with right at the moment, or it can be a film, a genre, but is there something that you would really like to share and say like, oh, people need to see this or try this?
I hope I'm not cheating with this answer, but during my time at home in quarantine, I really got into the application Mubi, M-U-B-I. They're also they distribute films, and they have a movie of the day. And that, I think, is the extraordinary way that I'm exposing myself to films, both new and old. And I think that just carries on in my personal, I guess, mission of exposing films, individuals to new type of films, is this kind of app that curates the content for the audience one film at a time each day. So that's kind of what I'm using as my vessel to stay connected to films during this kind of like shutdown time.
It's more fun to work, ideas flow, intuition grows, the understanding starts to grow, awareness, beautiful thing.
Well, I've had a chance.
And experiencing that ocean of pure consciousness, it's also an ocean of pure bliss, intelligence, creativity. All these things start to blossom, and fear, anxiety, anger, those things start to recede in the light of this consciousness. So it's money in the bank. It's more fun to work, ideas flow, intuition grows, the understanding starts to grow, awareness, beautiful thing.
Well, I've had a chance.
Experiencing that ocean of pure consciousness, it's also an ocean of pure bliss, intelligence, creativity. All these things start to blossom, and fear, anxiety, anger, those things start to recede in the light of this consciousness. So it's money in the bank. It's more fun to work.
All right, that was Moises Esparza, and we were at the Digital Gym's new location. That's why we're wearing hard hats and vests. And I got an extra little tour of Digital Gym Cinema. And before we go to that, I just want to thank Eric for that remix, because David Lynch is someone that I think expresses a lot about what Moises is talking about in terms of programming, which is, not necessarily staying in your comfort zone and exploring some different things. And that's what Digital Gym Cinema is all about. So let's take a little sneak peek at the new location. And it's going to be opening in October, but they had just put the drywall up right before we came to shoot. So take a look at the new Digital Gym. Okay, this is pretty exciting, Moises. We are entering what's going to be the new Digital Gym Cinema.
Yes.
Of course, we entered through the outdoor. That's not going to be where people come in.
Yeah, it's the emergency exit, but we had to do it because we're under construction for the time being. But yeah, this is the new Digital Gym Cinema.
So where is it?
Yeah, it's in downtown San Diego, the intersection of Park and Market, UCSD's newest building, and we're just really excited by this entire project. We used to be on Al Capone Boulevard. That was the Digital Gym Cinema's former home, and now we're here downtown, and I'm just beyond elated. I mean, as you can see, it's all under construction, so maybe from the angle of the camera it doesn't look like a cinema, but from where you and I are standing, we can definitely see the work in progress.
So this is going to be the screen.
Yeah, this is going to be the screen. The speakers will be behind. It's going to be kind of like floor to ceiling screen. The seats will obviously be opposite the screen. It'll be really kind of state-of-the-art facility. In my wildest dreams, I never thought that I'd be able to see and assist with the development of a cinema space. It's really a dream come true. So we're really excited. Our soft open is October 1st, so we have a couple months to get this all done. The Digital Gym Cinema's new home will be at UC San Diego at Park and Market, which we're really excited about. Yes, it'll be about 66 seats, which is an increase of seats from our former space. So we're getting 20 seats. If you remember, at the former space, we had an awkward entrance where we'd enter at the front of the screen, but this time you're going to be entering through the rear, so the image quality will not be interrupted by blinding lights. So we're definitely improving what we used to have, but we're going to honor the type of programming that we used to have at the former space here at UCSD.
And you're also getting an upgrade on all sorts of levels, because you're going to have a new lobby space, concessions. You're in this is a 4-story building where there's going to be other event spaces as well. So how is all that seeming?
We're going to have great concessions, a lobby space that we can activate with special events, obviously the cinema, which I'm discussing, and the building is just going to have all sorts of amenities that will allow us to not only program events here in the cinema, but in the different sort of other communal spaces activated to us or available to us. And then our offices are actually going to be in the same building. And there's going to be a great circular stairwell leading into the space. So it's going to be, such a great kind of like introduction to a space for people who are seeing it for the first time. I'm really excited.
So Moises, just walking around the construction site, things are not finished, but you can see a lot of nice design elements going on.
Yeah, they're really going to be extraordinary, the design elements. Right now we're in you can't really tell from where I'm standing, but it's a circular space. It's going to be really aesthetically pleasing, and there's going to be activations on the walls themselves, so it's going to feel like a very interactive space. And again, just thrilled to be in such a beautifully designed building.
I know some people may be a little concerned about moving downtown because parking is always an issue, but you have some public transit benefits being where you are.
Yeah, I mean, the trolley station is not even a block away. It's super close to the new UCSD building, so people can access it via public transit if it's not the trolley bus. Also, we're around several parking structures that are available to our customers. So I hope we don't intimidate individuals with our new location.
Enough action and sex and violence, and it's just like I watch it and it's like like I'm a cat getting its tummy rubbed. I'm just purring, sort of like this is exploitation perfection with Truck Burner. To me, Truck Burner is everything that's great about an exploitation. Just offensive enough, and it's just politically incorrect enough, and there's just enough action and sex violence. I watch it and it's like I'm a cat getting his tummy rubbed. I'm just purring, sort of like this is exploitation perfection with Truck Burner. To me, Truck Burner is everything that's great about an exploitation. Just offensive enough, and it's just politically incorrect enough. There's just enough action and sex and violence, and it's just like I watch it and it's like I'm a cat getting his tummy rubbed. I'm just purring, sort of like this is exploitation perfection with Truck Burner. To me, Truck Burner is everything that's great about it.
Okay, did that make us all purr?
Oh, maybe
cry. That might be your best one, Eric. That was David F. Walker, who's an author that we've had. Yeah. And Miguel and I, we both work at Digital Gym Cinema as volunteers through our Film Geeks San Diego group. And we have had this dream project of having David F. Walker introduce a series of blaxploitation. So talk a little bit, Miguel, about what drives you to want to show movies. Why is it important to share films?
I can tell a story about being a kid. It tends to go to childhood a lot, but I remember going to a friend's house and his dad had a collection of VHS movies, which in the 80s was rare because those were expensive. We didn't even have cable in my house. So I remember being in that room and seeing the movies, and we could watch whatever he put on, and just like sitting there and being shown things. I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. And every time I just get excited. And I want to share that excitement. And I feel like if someone else gets excited, then it's a kind of a cross current of excitement. And I don't know. There are voices out there that I feel get drowned out, and they need a curator to help them kind of be heard every now and again.
And Yazdi, you see a lot of films for Movie Wallace because you guys review a lot of films. What is it about sharing films and kind of watching films in a group setting as opposed to just watching it on your own? Because I think part of this whole addiction is this sense of you don't want to do it all by yourself. You really want other people to share the things that you love.
Yeah, I mean, we all like the good movies, but I think we all have an affection for the good, bad movies. And I think those good, bad movies are made so much better when you're watching them in a theater. And just the whole, environment of everybody laughing at the same thing or snickering at the same thing. You're part of a community of strangers, right? You don't know who else is sitting next to you, but you're all reacting as humans to the same thing. So I just love that. One of my favorite images ever is of, people watching a movie theater as somebody's taken a shot from down below. And also again, I grew up in India and, boy, if you're visiting India, go watch a movie there because it's such a communal experience. Everybody screams at the cinema. Everybody's talking to the characters. There is always an intermission and everybody's kind of elbowing each other because, what's the need for cues? And everybody's elbowing each other for samosas and popcorn. And it's just you don't feel alone. You don't feel alone when you're watching any kind of movie there. But it's just wonderful. I love that co-mingling with people you didn't even know have the same sensibility as you do with cinema.
Yeah, that's a great feeling. Now, for our next video, I want to take you to Brighton, England, and Cinebra. Now, for those of you in San Diego who might have attended the San Diego Fringe Festival and saw Cinebra, A History of Horror, you will remember these two ladies, Sophie and Megan. They were fabulous. And so when I thought about sharing addictions for film, these are the people I turned to. So we recorded this from Brighton. So enjoy Cinebra. I am so excited to be welcoming on to this Cinema Junkie launch party, Cinebra, which is Sophie and Megan. I met you ladies at the San Diego Fringe Festival, where I saw you present A History of Horror.
If slasher movies make you tick or haunted houses,
Zombie flicks.
if you don't feel right without screams in the night, then get comfortable in your seat. We thought it would be really cool to take you all to horror school and share our wisdom, facts and stuff. So here's your trick or treat. We're horror girls at the very best. We can cosplay with a rare finesse, with the biggest fans, with the biggest brains, and movie facts running through our veins. If you love the spooky and bizarre, you can learn a thing from Cinebra.
So before we talk about your addiction to film, tell me a little bit about Cinebra.
Hello, my name's Sophie.
I'm Megan.
And we really like movies.
So for those of you who don't know us, we are called Cinebra, which is like cinema, but with a bra.
Yeah, because we rate movies with bras instead of stars because they're just as relevant and supportive.
So we put on like informative seminars and stuff, but as well as being like really educational, we're also like budding social media starlets.
Yeah.
If you're interested, you can follow us on Facebook /
We Really Like Movies,
Instagram at
We Really Like Movies,
and Twitter at
Cinebra.
We're also on YouTube as well. I don't know if you know this, but this YouTuber Zoella who lives in Brighton, she earns £1.12 a minute just from doing her videos. And like, so if we really pushed our YouTube, like imagine what we could do with that kind of budget.
Yes, I quite agree. We should continue with the interview, really, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I guess we should.
Yeah.
That's us anyway.
Well, I wanted to find out, I'm asking everybody, what are their early memories of going to the movies? What do you think might have gotten you addicted to film early on?
When I was little, I always used to, we had like a couple of Disney DVDs. Like I used to really like The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, and I'd watch them on repeat like all the time. And I think like my earliest memory of watching films is just being really addicted to these animations and watching them over and over again. Do you know what I mean?
See, for me, like, it took a lot for me to build up the courage to my first ever cinema visit. I used to watch a lot of black and white films on YouTube growing up, particularly the important ones from our seminar, such as Dr. Caligari, and I did actually manage to find a secret link to London After Midnight, which is one of my favorite Lon Chaney films. It's so gorgeous. Yeah, I used to love all of those because like I could deal with those 'cause I'm quite a frightful person. But you know, I love special features on DVDs, don't get me wrong, so it was really nice seeing just like later pictures. Jaws is my favorite movie of all time, and seeing that on DVD was really quite something. And yeah, I'm being verbose, don't worry.
We actually met in year 3 of primary school, so we've been like watching films together for like a really long time.
Yeah.
Sophie's mum used to take us to the cinema, and now we like go to the cinema
all the time.
Our favourite cinema is Odeon, and we got limitless cards, which is where we pay like £16 a month, and we can just go to the cinema as much as we want. It's really cool.
You pay for yours?
What do you mean?
My mum pays for mine.
Wicked.
Now, when I saw you, you were performing a seminar on the history of horror. So you particularly have an addiction to horror. What is it about horror movies that you love?
Well, I just think particularly in these times, in the last year and a half plus that we've all been through as a planet, through revolt, war, questionable leaders.
With really bad fashion choices.
As well as, you know, all of these people ostracizing the coronavirus, saying it's a conspiracy, where it's clearly not. And it just really reminds us all that we as human beings like to really endorse our feelings of fear by watching other people experience fear in a similar way, and that satisfies our own need for survival.
Wow, Sophie, that's deep.
Yeah.
I think what Sophie's trying to say in like a less verbose way is that like horror really always reflects like the terrors of the times and like the stuff that's going on in the world, and it's a fun like way to handle the stuff that's going on. It's always a good social commentary.
As my granddad likes to say, the bullshit.
Do you have any particular obsessions right now with any horror films or themes that are currently going on?
Right now, I'm really obsessed with Fear Street that came out on Netflix. We actually went down in Brighton that's promoting it, and they gave me this free bucket hat. I tried to take Sophie down today, but it was closed. It's called Shady Side Videos, and it's like a pop-up video store. It's really cool. But what I'm really obsessed with this about is like, so Netflix is putting out the first one last week, which is in 94. It's set in 94. The one that's out today is set in the 70s. The next one that's out next week is set in the 1600s. And I've never seen like a trilogy that's been put out over
so many different eras.
Well, not even that. It's just the time period it's being put out like week by week. I think it's really cool.
Yes, it's quite amicable as a franchise, I must say. And I think it's really quite clever.
Things with Netflix is like they're able to do stuff that hasn't been possible in cinema before. I think that's really cool.
And the shameless referencing in the first one, I mean, really.
In a good way, though.
Yeah, obviously, but it did annoy me a little bit, because I was just like, there are going to be some people less educated than all of us speaking to each other right now who have no idea about those references. But we know, because we love movies.
So when I saw you a few years ago here in San Diego, you were dealing with some issues that required like exorcism and possessions and things like that. How has your life been since then? Have you had to deal with any more chaos like that?
Beth, it's a bit embarrassing to talk about this. Sophie literally vomited on stage. She doesn't like to talk about it.
I did wet myself as well.
Sophie. Yeah, it was a difficult time. It didn't exactly go to plan, but we got through it. It seems to be something that does happen often when we put that show on.
That's what friends are for.
But she's doing okay. We're doing fine. And we haven't seen any demonic activity, at least since last time we did History of
Well, you did have a moment at Christmas. You were quite, I want to say, disassociative at our Christmas show. I don't really know what happened there. What was your experience at the Christmas show?
Weird stuff seems to go down whenever we do shows, Beth. But thankfully, since it's been a pandemic, there hasn't been that much activity since we haven't been out performing very often.
Yeah, we've just been like FaceTiming each other and whinging, really.
Yeah. Now we're allowed to see each other again, which was nice.
I got vaxxed really, really quickly because I'm top priority.
You're right, Sophie.
Yeah.
One of the things I really enjoyed in your history of horror was you interviewed Nosferatu.
Thank you.
We were very, very lucky to share the same breathing space as such an iconic artist and performer.
Yeah, he's really cool.
Yeah. Very, very sweet. Doesn't say much. It's
No.
all in his eyes.
Do you have any films you'd like to share with people besides Fear Street? Maybe some older ones that you would like to get people kind of turned on to checking out?
Jaws. Jaws is my absolute favourite movie of all time. The shark is COVID. I'll leave that. Are you going to close the beaches? Particularly in the UK, it just slaps so differently. I mean, I know that my mum's a Tory, but I don't support any of that, really. It's been so awfully handled here, and I can't help but feel that the government at the moment are very much the mayor of Amityville. Like, it's just not very good at all. But here we are, everything's meant to be going back to normal on the 19th, and I'm scared because I'm very asthmatic. And what if the new variant gets me, much like Jaws herself? Everyone seems to think that even though they're referred to as Bruce had babies, which is fine. But like Godzilla also had babies, and everyone seems to think Godzilla. That's a different conversation. I'm just being verbose again.
I feel like the last few years are really having a horror renaissance again. Like, I feel like with directors like Jordan Peele, Ari Aster, and Robert Eggers, they're really feeding us at the moment. And I think in terms of contemporary horror, that's the sort of stuff I'm looking at. So
more Academy Awards for horror movies.
Toni Collette was robbed.
I completely agree. Hereditary. Midsummer. We love a daytime horror, don't we?
We do.
It was done so well. And the fact, what is it? Ari Aster, he doesn't actually acknowledge them particularly as horror movies. He says that they're about this, but they're marketed as horror movies, and they sell as horror movies, and they play out like horror movies. But some people who are perhaps, I don't know, stupid just don't get them.
I believe he said in an interview that he wants to do a musical next. I'd be curious to see what that is.
I did not hear this. Where did you read that?
It was in an interview a year or two ago.
Why wouldn't you tell me?
I probably did.
So does Cinebra have anything coming up that you're working on?
Well, our dear friends Glanzer and Rita just finished their run at Brighton Fringe. It's recently come to our attention that there's 2 other figures that may be on the rise.
Indeed, yeah. I don't know what we can say about that right now, but...
Well, we'll leave that with you.
But there may be something coming in August. Not from us.
A cliffhanger, you say, so... Well, I want to thank you both very much for making some time to celebrate the relaunch of Cinema Junkie.
Anything for you, Cinebeth. We love you and miss you so much.
I miss you guys. I wish you were out here to...
We miss you. I think about that cake that you made for us all the time. Honestly. Oh.
Kind of devised a theory or a statement that kind of covers that for me, and that is that the first monster that you must frighten an audience with in a horror film is the director, because this is important. This doesn't feel like this is outside the boundaries of anything that's controlled or acceptable or polite or civilized, because that's kind of where these fears come from. It doesn't come from a civilized matrix. It comes from outside of that. So I kind of devised a theory or a statement that kind of covers that for me, and that is that the monster that you must frighten an audience with in a horror film is the director. Because I think it's very important that the audience feel like this is outside the boundaries of anything that's controlled or acceptable or polite or civilized. Because that's kind of where these fears come from. It doesn't come from the civilized matrix. It comes from outside of that. So I kind of devised a theory or a statement that kind of covers that for me, and that is that the first monster that you must frighten an audience with in a horror film is the director. Because I think it's very important that the audience feel like this is outside the boundaries of anything that's controlled or acceptable or polite or civilized.
Thanks, Eric. That was Wes Craven, and I'm sure Sophie and Megan are big fans of Wes Craven, too. So just a reminder, too, this whole launch party here is about Cinema Junkie, which is the podcast I do for KPBS, and the latest and the first of the relaunched version of Cinema Junkie became available yesterday, and you can find that at kpbs.org/cinemajunkie. So please go take a listen to that. The first episode that we did on this relaunch is on teaching the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Arnold T. Blumberg from University of Baltimore, which actually happens to be where Miguel is from.
Lovely.
And Miguel, I wanted to talk to you a little bit because Megan and Sophie brought up horror, and this is something that you love. And is part of your addiction to horror the fact that a lot of these filmmakers are really very smart? People like George Romero, Wes Craven, and they are using their films to make social commentaries often, but not in a kind of in-your-face, overt way. And is that part of what you like about the genre?
I think it's part of what I've grown into, probably around my middle school age. I remember being taught in a English class in middle school an episode of Twilight Zone where that went through it, and I kind of made that connection amongst all kinds of things with movies I watched. But beforehand, not quite, but now it does allow you to explore. What I like about it is we can talk about uncomfortable things, things that are usually taboo or things that are disallowed, but it gives you kind of a permission to do that, and in a way you get power over those uncomfortable things by being able to relate on that level with other people. And that's what I really like about horror. I find horror to be very honest to who we are if it's done well. So ultimately it's more about that for me, but it is also very good for hiding a message in a popular medium.
Yeah, I think horror for me is about embracing the darkness. I feel like if I can see scary things in movies and deal with them, that somehow I'll be better prepared in the real world if anything really bad happens. Yazdi, I've seen horror films sitting next to you, and you've described yourself as a fraidy cat. But is there an attraction to seeing something that can potentially scare and unnerve you? Because you do go to see them.
I do go to see them, and I think I was traumatized as a child when I watched too many scary movies when I was far too young. So I think I went through my youth just staying away from horror movies. But since I've been in San Diego and spending more time with the both of you, I think you guys
corrupted you.
Yes, you guys have kind of inculcated me into the world of horror, and I'm very happy to report that I'm kind of starting to chip away at what I won't watch. Like I love a good zombie movie. I love a good, well-created
all
suspense
of Dead Alive
movies.
with us.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it. And that movie traumatized me as a child. It properly scared me, and then when we watched it, it was like a delight. It was fun. So I enjoy now as much as I complain. I think I enjoy when you're in a theater in a communal experience again. I think it's that nervous laughter when people are unsettled and they are scared. So they're not laughing because anything is funny, but they are giggling because they don't know how else to react. And I just love that feeling of, like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? I don't know how to react to this. So I enjoy that now. No, I do. So thank you, both of you.
You're very welcome.
Well, I also want to remind people that one of the reasons I wanted to relaunch Cinema Junkie in July is because this is the month of Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. And Comic-Con is coming back in virtual form one more time next week. And then there is going to be a live in-person one in November. And I talked to David Glanzer, who's spokesperson for Comic-Con. And the whole reason he got into Comic-Con in the first place was because he had a love of film. So let's talk to David Glanzer of Comic-Con International. David, you are the spokesperson for Comic-Con International, which is a total celebration of pop culture. And one of the things that got you into this job is that you yourself love movies. So I'm just curious, do you have early memories of going to movies, or like a moment or anything that you felt made this impact that hooked you on films from early on?
I wish I could say that I did. You know, my mother was born in Mexico, and she learned to speak English primarily through watching, late night television, which back in the day, the late night show meant movies, old movies, a lot of times black and white. And I've always been a night owl, and I would be there, kind of at her side watching film as well, and just discovered what an amazing storytelling apparatus that was, and the differences in the types of stories, but also in how those stories were told, from director to director, writer, actors, and all that. It was like this incredible tapestry that changed with every new movie you saw. So very early on, I really got involved in watching film and being mesmerized by old Hollywood, not just the movie making, but the whole mystique behind it. And then when I was introduced to conventions, and Comic-Con in particular, I remember someone telling me that they had a 24-hour film room. And sure enough, they did. And they showed, silent films and black and white films and current films. But what was equally as remarkable to me was being able to go on the exhibit floor and see people selling movie posters and movie scripts and even 35 millimeter trailers. And I think the big thing for me was finally finding people who not only loved film and had a passion about it as much as I did, but many even more so. And I learned so much from them and from attending these events.
And what kind of films did you enjoy watching early on?
That's really a great question. I would like to say that there's a particular genre I liked. I mean, I have always liked science fiction, but I think when it came to film, I don't know that I had a favorite genre per se. I mean, I loved film noir. Even right now, I'm starting to discover silent film, and oh my gosh, there's some amazing stuff out there. But when I was younger, I mean, horror films too. My parents, God bless them and may they rest in peace, would take me we would oftentimes go to a drive-in. And I think I saw a lot of films at a young age that maybe not completely appropriate for me. And by that, I mean stuff that was of an adult nature, meaning having to do with horror. And it's interesting because as I became an adult and I found other friends who had an interest in film, it was remarkable because they too seemed to see some of these films when they were young that I think our peers would have no idea what we were talking about. So I don't know that there was a specific genre, but just really good filmmaking. I did become really enthralled at one point with the Australian New Wave, which was a big movement in the 70s and 80s. And to this day, some of my favorite motion pictures are from that period.
Now, your addiction to film extends to the Star Wars universe, where it kind of crosses over from merely watching films to doing a little more. So you did some early cosplay, and you got really involved in just seeking out information about behind the scenes and being a part of that whole kind of cosplay community.
Yeah, I was, again, I'd always liked science fiction, and I was a big Star Trek fan, and I remember when Star Wars came out, my buddy and I, Jim, decided to go see the movie on, I think it was the Friday of the week it opened, so it was the 27th of May. And we were waiting in line, I tell the story, we were waiting in line And all of a sudden, I think we got there early, like at 7 o'clock, and we were waiting in line, and all of a sudden the line started moving, but we weren't moving. And I asked somebody, what's going on? And they said, well, that's the 8 o'clock show. You're in line for the 10:30 show. I'm like, no, we're in line for the 8 o'clock show. And I looked at my ticket, and sure enough, it was the 10:30 show. But I have to tell you, once we walked through those doors and it all started, that was a real defining moment for me. I had never seen a movie where people cheered and booed and hissed at the screen, that applauded, and it was a great, great celebratory, multi-sensory experience. And ever since then, I was a huge Star Wars fan. And yes, I tried to find out as much information as I could about the sequels. I bought movie posters. Was able to visit the set of Return of the Jedi, and when they filmed in Yuma, got to be friendly with people at Lucasfilm, did some cosplay, and to this day, some of my dearest friends are people who I met through Star Wars.
And tell us what you cosplayed as.
I had two different costumes. One was just a kind of like a pirate, but my first cosplay was as a Tusken Raider or a sand person. And the interesting thing is, back in the day, we didn't have videotapes that we could look at and stop and pause. So, as much of a chore as it may have been, we had to see the movie a lot. And we also collected every magazine you could conceive of. Not only American magazines, but Japanese magazines. We would go to LA and to Japantown and find magazines. A lot of the film magazines up there would have pictures we would never see. So we would analyze those pictures, especially if they had Tusken Raiders, and look at it and try to figure out. And my friend Allison and I made these costumes. They were an experience, but a great deal of fun. I think we even ended up in the newspaper, and it was a lot of fun.
Comic-Con is doing their second virtual edition. So how does it feel going into it this time? Do you feel like you've learned anything or applied any new ideas to the online experience?
Well, I think it's a lot less stressful, which should not be confused with not stressful. Mounting any kind of show, whether it's in person or online, always has a matter, some stress related to it. But no, we learned a lot, I think, in our last iteration. We have, a methodology now of how to get things done, how to upload stuff. A lot of information that I think really helped us. It's interesting because when we first started last year, I think we were probably, in terms of fan-related events, we're probably one of the first that really mounted something like this. And now that the pandemic seems to be, thankfully lessening, we may very well be one of the last. So we kind of bookend it. So we're excited. We think we have some cool stuff coming up, and fingers crossed that people have a good time.
And how are people going to be able to access it this year? Is it also going to be free like it was last year?
It'll be free. One of the things that we have done is a lot of the sponsorship involved, so that has really defrayed the costs, the hard dollar costs of what we've had to do. So it'll be free again. They can go to our website, and there are portals there to take them to whichever part of the event they want to attend.
Now, as much fun as I had doing the virtual panels, I of course missed the in-person event, and Comic-Con will be doing something in person in November. So what can people expect, or what do you know about what's going to happen in November at this point in time?
Well, I think you echo what we feel and what a lot of people feel. And one of the reasons we did the virtual Comic-Con at home was because of the sense of community. I mean, we really wanted to see if there was a way that, even though we couldn't see each other in person, maybe we could at least still partake in the stuff that we really enjoyed. It turned out to be very successful. Now that, again, the pandemic has seemed to, be slowing down a bit, and a lot of the restrictions are lifted, we're going to have an event in November. It'll be over Thanksgiving weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We like to say, spend Thursday with your family, and then spend the rest of the weekend with your fan family. It'll be a much smaller event. It's more of an intimate event. I don't want people to confuse the special edition, we're calling it Comic-Con Special Edition, with the July show. But it'll be an opportunity for us to kind of dip our toes back into the community interaction. There are so many friends that I miss seeing in person. We'll have the opportunity to do that. There'll be panels and exhibit floor. Some of the things that our conventions are known for. I expect that it'll be similar to our WonderCon show that we do in Anaheim. So it'll be a smaller show, a more intimate show, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
And at this point, do you know if you'll be using the whole convention center and satellite hotels as well, or is it still in?
We're still doing a lot of planning of that. We will be at the convention center. I think depending upon any number of factors, we'll be determining what it is and how much space we use. When we first discussed this, we didn't know if there would be space restrictions, if there would be social distancing, all of those things. So it continues to be kind of a fluid situation, so we don't have specifics. We do know we'll be at the convention center. We do know that we'll have programming and exhibit floor space. We'll be utilizing some of the hotels, at least certainly for room blocks and whatnot. Whether there will be outside meetings and stuff offsite, we really don't know yet. I anticipate that we probably won't. I think most of it will be probably contained within the walls of the convention center, but it's early enough that things can change and it could expand. I think what we've learned over the course of this whole situation is, be flexible, and that's what we're trying to do.
It's speedballing. It's heroin and cocaine at the same time. So that was part of the fun and exhilaration of going, we have to completely change this concept before we start shooting in order to make this happen. And so that's the seat of the pants filmmaking. That's almost all I've ever known from the first Evil Dead on.
For people who may not know what that process is like, what is that contrast like?
It's speedballing. It's heroin and cocaine at the same time. So that was part of the fun and exhilaration of going, we have to completely change this concept before we start shooting in order to make this happen. And so that's the seat of the pants filmmaking. That's almost all I've ever known from the first Evil Dead on.
For people who may not know what that process is like, what is that contrast like?
It's speedballing. It's heroin and cocaine at the same time. So that was part of the fun and exhilaration of going, we have to completely change this concept before we start shooting in order to make this happen. And so that's the seat of the pants filmmaking. That's almost all I've ever known from the first Evil Dead on.
First Comic-Con panel that he came and he just did this lightning session with the audience. He said, all right, I did my spiel. He goes, any questions, throw anything at me. And people were asking him about Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes or whatever, and he would answer all their questions in lightning speed, and he was hilarious. Miguel, I wanted to talk to you about TCM.
Yeah.
We both enjoy going to the TCM Film Festival.
Very much.
And this is about classic Hollywood. So what is it about classic Hollywood films that you love?
I just love film. So, I get to talk about horror all the time, but the reality is I love being transported, and classic film is a true transportation because you're not only getting the story and the sound and the visuals and the moving image, but you're also getting kind of a look at what the cultural mores were at a certain point in time, how people actually talked or how, they wanted to portray people talking. So I find it to be a very just wonderful and fantastical look at just ourselves. And what's great about classic films for me is even the films that were straight drama of the time, for us now are fantasy, right? Everything seems so fantastical. The way the clothes, the dancing, the way people talk to each other, the way they interacted, some of the things that were perfectly okay at one point that are no longer perfectly okay. All of that I love and am fascinated by and love talking about it. And also at the same time, I love noticing what has not changed so much. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that stayed static, or has cycled, like went out of vogue and is back in vogue. So all of these things about classic film, film is great because it's all art forms. It's photography and music and dance and acting and singing, and there's so much that is being used to express something that you could talk about so much. And I don't shut myself off to anything unless it stops interesting me in the moment.
And Yazdi, we've tried to get you to come to the TCM Film Festival, but it happens to be frequently at the same time as Tribeca, which is one of your loves. But you do have a love for classic Hollywood cinema as well.
I do, and when people ask me what my favorite films are, I think I can see the look of disappointment on their face when my top 2 or 3 movies are, The Philadelphia Story and Bringing Up Baby and Double Indemnity and all of these movies. And exactly like Miguel said, I think it's very difficult. It doesn't even have to be cinema. In any field, it's very difficult to evaluate where you are unless you know where you came from. And, there is some, like Double Indemnity cannot be improved on. I don't think anybody can ever make a better film noir than that. So I think, Philadelphia Story, that wit and that dialogue, that rat-a-tat volley of wit, I mean, you almost have to pause because you're going to miss, how quickly they're going back and forth. Nobody seems to write like that anymore. So it's not even medicine. It's just another kind of dessert. I promise people, please, if you've never been to a film festival, go to one. It's the same thing if you've never seen, and there are a lot of people who have never seen a black and white movie or a movie with subtitles. I'm like, do yourself a favor. This third eye is waiting to be opened. Yeah, I'm absolutely.
Now, one of the people we met at TCM, or through TCM, because TCM creates this community, is Nora Fiore, who is the Nitrate Diva, which is such a fabulous name. I spoke to her because she has some particular obsessions and addictions with old Hollywood cinema that I thought would be fun to share. So let's hear from the Nitrate Diva. All right, I am very excited to have the Nitrate Diva. I mean, that is such a great name, but that is Nora Fiore. And I met you through TCM because we love classic movies. So I wanted to ask you, do you have early memories of going to movies? And was there anything in your early life that really triggered this addiction to film for you?
Yes and yes. My first memories of going to the movies are embarrassingly basic for a 90s kid who grew up in Philly. I remember going to see the latest Disney movies with my friends and enjoying that, and it being more of a social experience than really being about the film. When it came to those Disney movies, maybe an early red flag or warning sign was the fact that I was always most interested in the villains. I always wanted the villain action figures, and I was always fascinated in the villains, and I made elaborate backstories up in my mind for the villains. So I mean, there's kind of a sign there that there's something developing into like a film noir fan potentially, where the whole movies are structured around the villains. So that was kind of my first experiences with movie going. What really hooked me on film was Universal Horror when they were starting to get their VHS releases in the 90s. You remember those little featurettes at the beginning of the VHS cassettes that were telling you about the Universal Horror collection or the Alfred Hitchcock collection. So I remember buying up a lot of those as a kid. When I say buying, I mean asking my parents to buy them or my parents buying them for me. And I was lucky because my dad loves classic horror too. So we were able to bond on that. One story I love to tell about this is one VHS that eluded me when I was a kid was the Dracula VHS. I had seen Frankenstein, a lot of the other big Universal Horror ones, but for some reason, my local video store did not have the Dracula one. So I grew up as a faculty brat at this little private school in Vermont, and there was this really cool high school girl who was very goth and very smart, but also like one of the kindest people I've ever met. And she kind of took me under her wing, I guess, because she sensed that I was a little weird too. And she, she liked horror, and we talk about horror. She's like, oh, the makeup for the films, they do it this way. She knew a lot about film. And I told her, oh, I really wish I could see Dracula. I've never seen Dracula. And one day in my mother's classroom, she left a brand new cassette of Dracula. And I probably became my most watched film of my childhood. That was like a gold brick to me. And I think that was also what inserted in my mind at a young age, the importance of sharing films. You know, it's not enough just to enjoy it yourself, but you really get something out of it when you help somebody else to discover a film or find a way to watch a film. So I think that planted the seed a little bit of what I do now.
And what is it that you love about watching movies?
Oh, gee, I mean, that's so many things. I mean, what I love about watching films is I find there's so much I can take and put into my own life. You know, there's so many life lessons you can get from films, and just the dialogue. Like if I had a nickel for every phrase I've stolen from a movie, sometimes I'll watch a movie I haven't seen in years and go, wow, I totally took that stance or that, that decorating nook or something like that. You know, some little piece of that I've taken into my life. I love films because they are, classic Hollywood films are escapism, and they can take you through adventures that you would never really want to be on in real life, but make that fun, and you get to emerge unscathed from dangerous and scary adventures. And the other thing I love about watching films is that they really trigger a lot of curiosity in me. It's not just the watching experience, it's what the films lead me to. It's almost like they're a little breadcrumb trail that will take me to something else. Like, I'm a compulsive researcher. One of the things that I've been very lucky to do through Nitrate Diva that people have contacted me to do is I get to do every now and then a video commentary. And I love doing those because some films, maybe they're not blazing landmarks in the history of cinema, but they're like these balls of wool that you start to pull at, and the things that you find are incredible. Like, I just did one on a film called 13 Washington Square, which is a very obscure Universal film from 1928. And, when I started looking into this film, the whole history of film stock and film lighting and the silent film, and this major technological overhaul that happened, and this whole set of tests that took place in the late silent era to test panchromatic film stock with incandescent lights. This was stuff that I never really understood until I had to for this film. And, this is a film, there's nothing about it really that would suggest necessarily that it has this place in history. It was one of the first films to use a full incandescent lighting system and really, get attention for that. But, it pulled me down this little rabbit hole. So it's the watching the films, it's the entertainment, it's the escape, it's the looks and the style and the sassy dialogue, but it's also the kind of alleyways and rabbit's warrens that these films can take me in, even if they don't seem particularly impressive themselves. Like, a lot of times if I'm watching a film, I will research how it was promoted. Like, did they sell it as a mystery? Did they sell it as a melodrama? Kind of trying to fit it into the time and the box that the studio saw it as, at least for my primary interest being classic film. But I mean, even, I recently talked to somebody about neo-noir, and I was curious, were these films promoted as noir? Were they promoted as just kind of mysteries, as sexy crime films, and you can really learn a lot about a culture and a time by just kind of scratching the surface of what these films have to tell us. So it's that dual experience of watching it and then kind of following up and doing all the research to kind of understand it. Those are the twin pleasures of it for me.
Now, we've hung out at the TCM Classic Film Festival, where you get to enjoy films almost 24/7 for a few days. But you mentioned to me an obsession, an addiction you have that I find absolutely fascinating. And this is, you don't just watch these old movies, but you look for props for a particular reason. So explain this addiction you have.
So it's not like an intentional thing. It's not like I'm watching a film and I'm saying, oh, well, I want to see if I can recognize anything from another film. It's almost more like something I can't turn off. But I think it comes from being obsessed with classic Hollywood films and the studio system, because you realize that these were studios. When a set was broken down, or when if they wrapped a production, they would have to put stuff into storage. Costumes wouldn't get thrown away, they'd go into costume storage, they get reused. So for me, seeing these recycled props and set pieces and costumes especially is just kind of a fun little way to remind yourself of all the work that went into these films, of all the thought and planning and logistics. And it's also just kind of a fun little memory game for me. A couple of examples of things like this are the famous statue head in The Big Sleep that contains the camera in Geiger's little bungalow. Well, I was watching a wonderful Bette Davis melodrama noir called Deception, and in her apartment, there's that head. And I'm kind of like, oh, Betty, were you blackmailing anybody? What's that doing on your shelf, girl? Just last night, I was watching a Warner Brothers kind of noirish thriller called This Side of the Law. It's not a very distinguished film in any way, although it's a fun watch. And I see Janice Page, the kind of vamp in this film, who is actually still with us, I believe. She comes in this beautiful house coat, lounge coat with this sparkly stripe and a little bow, and I'm going, I've seen that before. Where have I seen that before? I've seen it on Lauren Bacall in Dark Passage, and they're both Warner Brothers films, so that is absolutely the same costume item. Another one of these, even going very far back, Journal of a Crime is a film from 1934, I believe. It's a Ruth Chatterton, weird little melodrama crime film. And she's at this party, and on one of the minor characters, there's this beautiful dress that's dark and silky, and it's got this very glittery top. And I go, where have I seen that? And then I go, oh, it's a dress from Babyface. Barbara Stanwyck wears that in Babyface. It's this gorgeous, famous Uri Kelly dress. I mean, it's a very distinctive dress, and the year later, they're recycling it. I wonder if people at the time recognize that, or if that's just a product of the very unique relationship we can have with images in this digital era, where we can pause it and take a screenshot with it. We can really, our ownership over these images is a real privilege of being a modern viewer. So I think it's in some ways, I think, well, back then I'm sure somebody noticed, but then I think, well, maybe this is one of the perks of, I don't get to see it in the era. I don't get to see it on a beautiful nitrate print in the theater, but there are some consolations. Like, I get to obsess over these in a way that would not have been possible back in 1934 or 1950 or 1946 or whatever. Another thing I keep looking for is a certain staircase, a Warner Brothers staircase that is in, dozens of Warner Brothers films. Once you've seen it, you can't forget it. It's kind of the main centerpiece of the set in The Man Who Came to Dinner. And I've seen it in The Big Sleep. I've seen it in Crime by Night. I've seen it in Dark Passage and Highway 301. Like, you cannot miss this staircase. Once you see this staircase, you're going to be doing the Rick Dalton pointing thing all the time. That's the staircase. That's the staircase. That's the Warner Brothers staircase. So hopefully I've opened people's minds to this staircase. I tend to see this the most in RKO and Warner Brothers films, because those are the studios whose output tends to be most aligned with my tastes. Another one that recently occurred to me was I was watching a film called Flying Leathernecks, which is quite a good war picture by Nick Ray with Robert Ryan and John Wayne. And at the very beginning, it starts with the scene where all these different wives on the home front are reading telegrams, and one of the wives is wearing this pretty white dressing gown with little gold ornaments on the collar. And I'm thinking, that is absolutely a dress worn by the femme fatale, or house coat, or dressing gown worn by the femme fatale in Born to Kill. So like completely different context there, where it's worn on this saintly wife in her white dress reading the telegram and thinking about her husband, versus one of the meanest femme fatales in all of noirdom. And it's funny to see it in color versus black and white. That's a very fun thing when you get to see a black and white costume in color and suddenly get to see what it looks like. That's really exciting for me. So this has become a bit of an addiction for me, to play a memory game with the costumes and share this when I find it, because I think it does illustrate that these are not just illusions and fictions, but they're really the result of a tremendous amount of work and organization and thrift and economy. And classic Hollywood was all about economy in many ways, as much as it was about spectacle. It was about those kind of two things coexisting, and I think this phenomenon brings that to light.
It'll be next, I don't know, but it certainly won't be producing a movie. Well, it's what I do best, I suppose, or where I feel most at home, but it has been exciting doing a bit of adventuring, and going and getting into movies. No, I hope, and one of my motives for doing this film and providing myself with the best, one of the best parts ever written, was the hope that I would then go on to do more movies. What it'll be next, I don't know, but it certainly won't be producing it. Well, it's what I do best, I suppose, or where I feel most at home, but it has been exciting doing a bit of adventuring. I hope one of my motives for doing this film and providing myself with the best, one of the best parts ever written, was the hope that I would then go on to do more movies. What it will be next, I don't know. It's certainly producing. Well, it's what I do best, I suppose, or where I feel most at home, but it has been exciting.
Look what Ian McKellen does to Miguel. Thank you, Eric, for that remix. All was just saying we needed to put a couple of cages behind Eric with some, Miguel and Yazdi go-go dancers back there. That would have been lovely.
Can be done. Yeah.
By the way, I want to say, even though we're not answering everybody's comments on Twitch because we're doing this stuff live, you guys, these stories you're sharing about your memories about film and stuff are just great. Miguel's watching himself now. We have a 25-second delay, so he's thoroughly enjoying himself. But again, I want to thank all of you for all those wonderful stories that you're sharing in the Twitch chat. It's fabulous. I love hearing about people's memories of like first scary films and seeing films with like their parents or their grandparents and the memories that holds for them. And Nora was sharing this wonderful obsession she has about, tracking props and costumes. Do you guys have any particular weird obsessions with film that you want to share?
Do you want to go first? Because I can go. I might go on.
You can't go on forever.
I can't go on forever. I'll try.
Sure. I mean, my obsessions are all very garden variety. I have this thing where if I watched a movie, like in a theater, and I go back and sit in my car, I will not turn any music on or talk with anyone. I need that time when I'm driving back home to just kind of, let the thing kind of settle in. And then I'm obsessed about certain filmmakers, certain actors, and, I will just watch everything that they do. But outside of that, I don't have a particular, obsession in terms of, going down rabbit holes in terms of things. I wish I did. I really did.
There's plenty of time you can find
There's
those.
so much time. Before I get started, I do want to say, wow, Nitrate Diva, Nora, if you're awesome. You're always awesome. It's been 2 years since we've been able to see you, and it was great to hear you talk because you're brilliant. But I have to narrow it down. So I think my obsession is finding the unloved and showering it with love, and particularly with international cinema that was not designed for an American audience. So I like Bollywood and Hindi films and Telugu films. These films are not really meant to be international. They were very insular. The films of Turkey, the films of Mexico, the films of Indonesia, they weren't really meant to travel across international lines. So what you have is it's kind of like what I was saying with classic films, is a true, almost, you're seeing something completely removed from what you're used to. Even if there are no subtitles available. Sometimes it's better when there are no subtitles available. So in the interest of Yazdi sitting next to me, I'm going to point out the Ramsey brothers. Do you know the Ramsey
Yes,
brothers?
I do
Of
know the
course
Ramsey
you know
brothers.
the Ramsey brothers. So,
They ruined my childhood. They properly ruined my childhood. They did. Tell everyone about the Ramsey brothers.
PTSD right now.
Yeah, I know, you're very
shaking.
all right, so the thing about the Ramsey family in India is this is like the Shah family in Hong Kong, where this is a family of filmmaking history that stretched back to the beginning of cinema. But in the 1980s, two brothers from this family of cinema makers focused exclusively on horror films, and very shaped by American horror films. So it would be like Dracula kind of monster movies. Sometimes it was straight up remakes of American horror films. And so they were prolific. They made so many. And so many people in the United States don't even know the name Ramsey Brothers. So film lovers generally know Shaw Brothers and can even say they know the Shaw Brothers music at the beginning, but the Ramsey Brothers have not made that international impact. And so my obsession is to try and let people know, right? So you keep bugging me about restarting the Delirio series. That's what that was about. And you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. I need to do that. So anyway, that's obviously my obsession is to things like the Ramsey Brothers and Rene Cardona in Mexico, and the Philippines. There's just such a wealth of crazy stuff.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, such a wealth.
And we're looking forward to Digital Gym reopening so we can show more films.
Yes. Darn right.
So we have one last video to share, and then we're going to be coming back. And this is the Soska sisters talking about some of their new projects. And I will tell you that when they talk about the unseen, I can't wait for that. So here are the Soskas. I also want to talk to you about what you're working on, because I adore American Mary. It's one of my favorite horror films of all time. You guys did a fabulous job on that. And I want to know if you're going to be doing some more kind of personal films, because you've had great success, but I want one of those really...
I know, we just remade David Cronenberg's movie to be like, in case anyone doesn't know who David Cronenberg is, this movie is a nice introduction, and go do your homework, right?
Yeah, well, they say that after you make like a movie like American Mary, they have this phrase, you got to give one to the town.
Oh, yeah.
You ever hear this one? It was some very old like Hollywood like logic I got, like, give one to the town. And it's like, you got to work with studios and like WWE and Lionsgate, work with them. And then they'll let you do one of your personal ones after. And no. I found the last movie I made for somebody else was Mr. David Cronenberg, who, funny enough, was such a fan of ours in American Mary that he would have been happy to sit down with us without us making a film that was basically a love letter to him.
Yeah, we should have just tried and got that coffee before spending 5 years making that movie. But no, I
felt Rabid was a nice introduction to be like, I really love you. Here's a lot of stuff to discuss, and let's have coffee.
Well, I think we've done so many studio things. We wanted to do something weird again, and we had such a good deal with that. They were like, we're going to handle the money and you guys handle the creative. And I was like, oh, the tentacle is going to be magnificent this time. The cool thing about having power over creative is from all the experience that we've had, we have more creative that we're doing with American Mary. I always wanted to do 2 more films, but it looks like we'll be adapting that series into a TV series, which I'm overjoyed on. We finished a 5-season arc on that. And it's funny because I was so obsessed with that world, and you only get to tell so much of a story in that portion of a time. And I remember even the actresses telling me, it's too bad Ruby and Beatrice don't have a scene together because they have such an obsessive relationship. And I was like, oh, fuck, they're in the same location and they don't even speak to you. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I gotta get all this stuff out. And now, almost 10 years later, it feels like the themes of American Mary are even more poignant. Yeah. And I feel like, just look at the things that have happened in Me Too lately about things being overturned and people being like, oh my God, like there's a lot of people being like, does anybody care about what people go through, especially women? And I feel like, not almost in a Dexter-esque way, but there's something about a self-fulfilling prophecy, almost like a promising young woman that Mary had this like potential of what she could be. And she was given all these really bad choices. And she just went down a dark path. And I think working women can understand that. They're like, oh, okay, I'll just sew this guy up. That's fine. Oh, this woman wants her nipples removed. Okay, that's fine. And at one point, by the time you're, mutilating your professor, you're like, oh man, I think I've gotten a bit of darkness in me too.
Yeah, no pun intended. We fleshed out the series. My favorite example is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Great idea, iconic movie, but the TV series really, it was like a cultural revolution. Yeah. And I really feel that American Mary got sold short, and she could have done so much more like right after the film, because I wanted to say more. And I think that, divine timing is definitely a thing, and it worked out at the right time. Also, right place, right time. My favorite takeaway from Rabid is Martin Katz from Prospero Pictures, who is David Cronenberg's producer. He's been producing his most recent films, and you can really see a relaxation that David has because he has creative support, I've learned. And working now with Prospero Pictures and Radar, Ted Fields' amazing company, it's amazing to see what it feels like to have creative producers that let you create.
Yeah, very the kinds of notes I have are so existential and creative. It's an absolute joy. And the kind of monster, we've been wanting to make this monster movie, Bob, for years. Yes. And we'll be making that with Prospero, and then Prospero and Radar, it looks like might be teaming together for Unseen. And it's just exciting to see what's coming out of that, especially with the designs.
Yeah, and Bob is, of course, such a personal film. We wrote it at the same time as Mary.
Yeah.
It's an elevated horror film that's about abuse, and it's about trauma and how we heal from trauma, and how so many of us have this one event or this one person that kind of derails us from being the person that we needed to be or living the life that we deserve to live.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to make Bob sooner, but again, I feel like it's right now the time to be making that film. And of course, it's in pre-production. It was in pre-production before COVID happened, but COVID happened, and it's already a very ambitious film. But speaking of another ambitious film, we adapted a video game called Blindside, which was based on a genius's own experience with becoming blind. He recovered his sight, but he realized how terrifying it was. So he made a very small video game like module to play where two characters, a Chicago couple, wake up 100% blind. And we took that and made a full sci-fi film.
Oh yeah, this is our first sci-fi.
It's
That's
our
right.
first sci-fi films. I love sci-fi
it's so
because
fun.
you take one idea and you make an entire film about it. Like, this is basically the idea is, why are we cruel? Like, if there's a fly buzzing around, why do we kill it? What is that inside of us that makes us react in hatred before we just take a step back?
That unseen element that maybe if two characters become blind, it comes more to the surface. Unfortunately, they're being hunted for their lives.
Yeah, and it's oddly both the most commercial and the most artistic film we've ever written, because it's going to be in very, very low light. It's going to feel like a survival horror experience. And if we do it right, as I intend to, if you watch it with your eyes open, you're only going to get more scared. You can watch the entire thing with your eyes closed, and that's what I recommend.
So it's the same experience. We're going to make a 3D audio atmosphere. So it's creepy stuff, but it's so much fun to get to play with this kind of IP, because like I would be we would all be first in line for this, and I always feel like I'm like the fan that broke in, so I'm like, okay, just sit here as a fan getting to play all this fun stuff with all these cool people, and no one knows it.
Yeah, I'm such a Daredevil fan that when this project came, I probably mentioned Daredevil like 100 times to an audience that is not that familiar or that interested in Daredevil. And I'm like, listen, taught myself Braille when I was 12. Yeah. You have no idea how much I've thought about what it's like to be blind, and how your different senses take over, and what is your reality? Because is our sense of reality any more improved because we're sighted? Not necessarily. There's so many stories about somebody who's had their cataracts removed and then they wear blackout glasses because they do not like the experience of sight.
Or if you think about humans and animals and even insects, we all see things differently. And they say that colors don't actually exist. That's us looking at something and thinking that it has that color in it. So what is sight?
All stuff to be discussed in our film. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, so it's fun to, I feel like during this time, we've just been working on all these projects constantly. So I feel like I'm a bit obsessed. Hopefully we can bring one of these new movies to you.
Oh yeah. I really want to sit in the theater with people watching Unseen, because I want people to run out screaming. That's my goal.
I like it when people jump, and I know what happened to me. There's a few jump scares I'm very excited about.
The whole thing is very unsettling. Most of our movies, there's at least one moment of like levity or you can breathe, but this whole thing happens in a real-time sequence. So it's very upsetting.
Is it our first scary movie? Like scary?
I think they're all funny.
Because they spread of infection, you have issues of protecting your loved ones. You also have big issues like a zombie plague shutting down the economy, people fearing for their livelihoods as well as their lives. Unlike other horror monsters, which tend to be very small and isolated and intimate, zombies are big, and so is this plague.
That's right. Like I've been saying for years, everything you need to know, you can learn from zombies.
Zombies are a great metaphor for this pandemic because they spread just like a plague. You have issues of infection, you have issues of protecting your loved ones. You also have big issues like a zombie plague shutting down the economy, people fearing for their livelihoods as well as their lives. Unlike other horror monsters, which tend to be very small and isolated and intimate, zombies are big, and so is this plague.
That's right. Like I've been saying for years, everything you need to know, you can learn from zombies.
Zombies are a great metaphor for this pandemic. You have issues of protecting your loved ones, people fearing for their livelihoods as well as their lives. Unlike other horror monsters, which tend to be very small and isolated and intimate, zombies are big, and so is this plague.
Zombies.
Zombies are a great metaphor for this pandemic because they spread just like a plague. You have issues of infection, you have issues of protecting your loved ones, you also have big issues.
And yes, that was Max Brooks talking about zombies. That's a really cheery note to have us end on, Eric. But thank you so much for DJing this party for me. I appreciate it. And if you guys have enjoyed this, we are still trying to get a Eric rave party after a screening of Videodrome, maybe when Digital Gym reopens. New
flesh party.
New flesh party. Yes.
Chest vagina.
So thank you, Eric, for you had to get that in at the end. We almost made it.
It got so close.
We got so close.
It's not wrong.
Anyway,
we're down to 39.
We have survived our first live Twitch party. I want to thank Miguel and Yazdi so much for joining me. Miguel, when is the next Horrible Imaginings event? What's coming up?
So we're actually doing something new on August 12th. We are doing Horrible Realities, where we're going to start a documentary true crime series. So we're going to kick that off with a double feature of docs that I would love to bring to San Diego during the Digital Gym as well. One documentary is called Rondo and Me, about Rondo Hatton. And the other one is another. So we did a Fulci documentary before. There's a new one called Fulci Talks. And it is just a conversation with Lucio Fulci before he died. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then September 2nd through 5th is our festival, which will be both in person and virtual. So, a lot to do, but I'm excited. We've got a lot of very interesting things to share.
And Yazdi, where can people find Movie Wallas? And do you have a new one up?
People can find Movie Wallas at www.moviewallas.com. MOVIEWALLAS, moviewallas.com. And our latest podcast is on Tribeca Film Festival. We could not attend in person, but hopefully we'll be able to do so next year. But we got access to lots of movies on streaming and, so many movies, never enough time. And our latest podcast is on more recently released movies, which include Luca, F9, and Black Widow.
All right, and Yazdi is also going to be one of the guests in August, along with his two partners, Rashmi and Joe. And we're going to be talking about Bollywood films and showing you how to make some Bollywood intermission food. I'm so excited about this. Yeah, so that's going to be in August. So once again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for sharing all these memories and addictions in the chat. Again, this has been to celebrate the relaunch of the Cinema Junkie podcast, so please go to kpbs.org/cinemajunkie to listen to the podcast. There are 200 episodes in the archives, and then we are starting kind of afresh with a slightly new format. So check that out, and then there is a Geeky Gourmet video paired with each of the podcasts, and that is going to be where I show you how to make a themed food or drink to go with the podcast. Yes. So we talked about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'll show you how to make comic book cookies and chocolates. In fact, we can go eat some of those after we shut down here, because we're done, guys. This is it. Congratulations to everyone. Thanks to Mel and Eric and Miguel and Yazdi, and thank you all for joining us and hanging out for almost 2 hours.
What?
Thank you.
There was no way that was almost
all
2
right.
hours.
Take us out with some tunes, Eric.
I'm Beth Hacamando. I'm Beth Hacamando. Welcome to another edition Welcome to another edition of the third edition of the to another edition of the third edition of the third edition of the welcome to another edition of the third edition of the third edition third edition of the third of the listen down come on down I'm Beth Commando I'm Beth Commando I'm Beth Commando come on down no Podcast. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another welcome to the Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Commando. I'm Beth Commando. I'm Beth Commando. I'm Beth Commando. I'm Beth Podcast. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported KPBS supported KPBS listeners cast. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Commando. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Commando. Welcome to another edition of the KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Commando.